we are all going through things. And especially in the corporate environment, you have to put that aside and go and meet your goals and get your KPIs. Humans are innately creative. We want to create things. And so that weighed heavily on my mind. What am I really doing? Who am I trying to help?
If you only have 90 days left to live, what would you be doing with your time?
What are you going to do next? You're upset by this thing? What are you going to do? We suffer more in our minds than in reality, and expectations are a big, big part of that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Corporate-Dropouts podcast. Today, we're diving into a special conversation about what it truly means to step away from a traditional career path and embrace a life that's guided by purpose, resilience, and personal growth. I'm your host, Brad Didrikson, a former petroleum geologist turned entrepreneur and now community host. And like many of you listening, I once felt the weight of corporate life pulling me away from what really mattered to me. So I took the leap and started my own journey about a decade ago to create something meaningful outside the 9-to-5. And it hasn't always been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding for me. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's walked a similar path to me and brought her unique creativity, empathy, and leadership insight to everything she does. Kate Thompson is a coach, writer, and former art museum director, a content strategist and tech professional who's worked with some big names like Red Hat. But she left that world to find her own version of fulfillment and freedom. Now she's dedicated to helping creative leaders find clarity and purpose outside of traditional structures, just like she did. We first crossed paths at Dave Gray's weekly creative meetup, the School of the Possible, where we meet on Fridays to connect and share ideas. And Kate and I kind of connected at that meeting around the idea of pushing boundaries and thinking beyond the corporate box to bring empathy back to large organizations. So, Kate, thank you so much for being here today. I know we've got a lot to cover, from what inspired you to make that first leap to the practical ways you redefine success for yourself. For our listeners, whether you're just beginning to consider your own corporate exit or you're already out there forging your path, this conversation is for you. Our goal today, Kate and I, is to give you a real, honest look into the highs and lows and all the lessons learned along the way. So, Kate, let's start at the very beginning. You had a successful career in the tech world. What initially inspired you to leave that corporate path and explore something new?
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me here. To be honest, I was laid off. So I might just at the beginning, but I made it my choice, right? I don't want to live in a way that puts the blame on my external circumstances. So I decided that it was going to be the best thing that ever happened to me, and I just didn't know it yet. Right after the layoff, I took a little time. What do I want to do? Looking for jobs, applied to jobs, and then thought, you know what? I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to be a consultant. I want to do leadership consulting. I can do some coaching. I really came at it from the perspective of helping people with their big vision, mission, setting some goals, and really having a thought partner to bounce ideas off of and an accountability partner. So you actually have to make decisions, because a lot of people like to keep things vague because then you can't fail, right? But that's not very useful. So I thought, I'm going to do this. And I made the announcement, and then about a month later, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So,
Wow.
right?
That's brutal.
And I'm very lucky. You know, they say the best prevention is early detection. It was absolutely early detection. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. I had the most common type, is very treatable, but it was cancer, and it carries the weight with it even then. And I didn't have to have chemo, thankfully, but I did have to have surgery and radiation and follow-up surgeries. And there was just a lot of stuff there. So
Yeah.
that made me stop and think, okay, universe, what are you telling me? Or what can I choose to take from that? Does it mean I need to slow down? Maybe I'm not ready to go out and build my own business. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to keep doing it because after all, I don't have really bad cancer. I have the easy cancer, right? I can do this. So that's how I started here. Um, and I can keep talking about where that led me, but I don't know if you have particular things you want to.
Well, yeah. I mean, to get laid off and then go, okay, well, let's just see where this takes me. And then it takes you right into, I guess maybe it was okay I was laid off because now I can deal with my breast cancer. Wow. That's brutal. Whether you're laid off or you choose to jump on your own, it's a process, right? And you went through an extra process, going through a health challenge right at the beginning. What were some of the fears or doubts you wrestled with early on, and how did you move through them to keep going?
Absolutely. Well, I would say I'm still going through it. And in fact, I've written a little bit about that, about the desire to be through, but you can't be through without going through. There's so much information and expertise and advice out there for solopreneurs, freelancers, consultants. There's a lot of stuff around positioning and finding your niche. And I understand that stuff, right? Because I had done that sort of work before. And so that weighed heavily on my mind. All right, well, what am I really doing? Who am I trying to help? What's the problem that they have? Am I inventing something? Am I just trying to sell a solution that there's really no problems for? So that I've thought about that a lot, kept coming back around to, you know what, this is just the time for you to be experimenting and seeing what works. You don't have to niche down yet. You don't have to do that. But it also means it felt like put a little bit over here, a little bit over here, a little bit over here. I'm like spreading myself really thin, not making very much progress, but I am staying in action. And that was very useful for me, right? Because it would have been easy to get caught up in the poor me, well, it's me.
Absolutely. And you have every right to do that. Nobody would blame you.
Yeah. And it's funny, so many people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Why are you so going for it? And you have every right to be just like that. And I'm like, yes. And I'm choosing to take radical responsibility now. Like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? How am I going to make the best of the situation? What am I going to learn from it? And it also gave me a lot of empathy toward just everybody's got something. Everybody's got something going on in their life. Maybe they have an illness. Maybe someone they love does. Maybe they don't have a great relationship with their family. Maybe their work is shitty. Maybe they're, oppressed by the system. Just sort of that. We are all going through things. And especially in the corporate environment, you have to put that aside and go and meet your goals and get your KPIs. And you can't take too much time away, and you certainly can't talk about this stuff, but actually you should talk about it a little bit because that's team rapport, but not too much. I did feel very thankful that I can just say whatever I feel like saying right now because no one is going to fire me.
Yeah.
I am just at home. I am just me. And so I wrote a lot in my Substack, and I did not set out to write about cancer or coaching or anything, but it just kind of happened that way. And I decided to just follow the energy. Like, where was it going? What is most alive for me in that moment? So a lot of what this past year has done has taught me to be more conscious of the present moment and more alive. And I had started doing that a little bit in my corporate job. It's so easy to get wrapped up in fear and anxiety, right? Of like, well, what if we did this thing? It didn't work out. What are we going to do? The thing in the future. And I get it, but it ends up not being useful. By the way, you're right. I use that word a lot. The title of my blog is Useful Beautiful. It comes from William Morris of the arts and crafts movement at the turn of the century, last century. He would say, keep nothing in your home that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. And I've turned that inward on my thoughts. Not that you can prevent your thoughts, because you can't, they happen, but it's the noticing, it's the present, being able to say, oh, first of all, is that true? But even untrue things can still be useful.
Yeah, this is a very interesting way of looking at it. We've talked about being present on one hand, and then there are the KPIs, the performance, the OKRs, right, that we need to meet as an organization or as a group to do something bigger than ourselves. But yet, as a human, we need to stay present and not attached to those outcomes. And I just think the useful, beautiful thing is maybe a really novel way to bridge the gap between those two. It seems like a whole other kind of definition of success. But would you say that your definition of success is that, or how has your definition of success evolved as you've kind of been away from corporate for a little and the KPIs for a little bit?
That's such a wonderful question. I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you here.
Go for it.
My success right now is in just acceptance. It's not love of the present moment, but that's what I need right now. And to not worry and not have so much anxiety, because that's not serving me. So if I can have patience, then resilience and love, then I am being successful. But you can't be 100% conscious and noticing your bad thoughts and annoyance all the time. Like it's not, maybe the most enlightened person out there is, but the rest of us humans walking around, we get annoyed by stuff. We get angry, we get sad, all of these things. And the point is not to shield those things or to suppress them. It's to notice and get curious and say, oh, that's interesting. What is going on? Why did that bother me so much? And to look inside. I made a joke. I think it was John Cutler, who shares all sorts of awesome stuff on LinkedIn, had said something about like, what do we need to do to have a realistic conversation about leadership? And I made the joke of like mandatory shadow work, which is the Jungian psychology thing, looking at your ego and your persona and what is it about those fears, and it is fear-based, that we have fear of being rejected, fear of losing status, fear of, there's so much fear of loss that's stronger than desire for gain that drive decisions, and in corporate too, right? Everybody says, yes, that's where we're going. We have a North Star or whatever you want to call it. But then each individual is still individually driven as well, because they have things and they don't want to lose their job. And if they manage themselves out of a job, that's not great. Or, if they piss off so-and-so. So I think doing that inner work is so powerful. And part of what I dedicated this year to doing, and I feel like the cancer kind of helped give me the permission that I felt that I needed to slow down and do it.
Yeah. What a strange gift, huh?
Yeah. So actually, there was another gift that came with it. And I did write about this. There's an essay on Useful Beautiful about cancer being less devastating than my layoff. So, at the time, I decided that cancer was happening for me, not to me. But I didn't know how. Again, it was like getting laid off. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me, but I just don't know how yet. It's happening for me, not to me. But I don't know how, but that's okay. I'm going to trust the universe, and I'm going to learn from it and grow from it and evolve from it. And something that I really did not expect was the community, and not just the community, but the extraordinary compassionate service of the people in the medical field.
Yeah.
So, radiation treatment, you go every single day and you see a lot of the same people, both patients and techs and nurses and doctors. And it doesn't matter Like when you're a cancer patient, you can just be however you are. It's okay if you're in a bad mood, if you're in a great mood, like it doesn't matter. You just show up, you just do you. And they're like, it's okay, honey. Like you do you. We'll come in, we'll do this. And it made me realize just like, first of all, how much I needed that to not have to put on a mask for the people around me, which you do have to mask at work in the corporate world, that I could feel my feelings, even if they were angry, upset feelings that make the other people uncomfortable. Like these people put their own needs aside at their job every day. And it just made me think so much about like how difficult that is. And honestly, that's something that I have to do as the coach too, right? I can't show up with my shit. I have to be completely about the person. And so you have to have a network. You have to have your support group, your trust tree. You will, whatever that is, your third place, your community. You have to have places where you can just go be completely you. So you can put it on when you need to. And that's the thing. Everybody wants authenticity, except they don't want authenticity. They want you to be easy.
Right.
They want you to be authentic until it makes them uncomfortable. And again, that's part of the inner work. Well, you're uncomfortable. Your discomfort is actually coming from you, not from however the person is being.
Yeah, it's like everybody wants you to be authentic, but in a cleaned up kind of way. Like, don't bring your mess, because I don't know where to put that in my brain. So as long as you bring it in this boxed, clean way, I can deal with your authenticity because I can put it here.
Yeah, or we want our leaders to be authentic, but they also have to be very confident and strong because they're the leaders, and people end up not trusting or not being okay following a leader who does not come across confident, competent, and strong. So it makes sense why we have to do the masking.
Yeah, you get up and you put on your clothes, go to work, and that includes a mask that is a lot of times emotionless, cold, right? And that's how you make it through the day to actually perform the tasks that you need to do. And there just isn't a lot of space outside of, going to lunch with people where you can, touch somebody on the shoulder. Heaven forbid you touch somebody on the shoulder and ask them, hey, how you doing today? Or are you okay?
It's strange, and it becomes very draining when you have to do that over and over again. Yeah. And so that's why you hear people talking about how we need to be able to bring our whole selves to work and all that. I agree with the sentiment, but I'm not sure that I'm going to catch myself here before I say I'm not sure. Well, many things are possible. I'm not sure if it would be useful.
Yeah. Going back to your comments on leadership, I think it's only as useful as the leaders in the organization allow it to be. Well, there are incredibly empathetic and authentic leaders, CEOs out there that recognize the value of bringing more humanity into problem solving. And then there are environments where that works, and then there are environments where that doesn't work, so it's hard to just make a judgment call on an organization in that way. But I don't see, like you said, there's always going to be an issue with corporations and organizations feeling cold. It's just the way it is because it's a business. But that doesn't mean that we should just give up and not try to find ways to inject our humanity and our kindness, our empathy into the business somehow in a meaningful way, right? Not in a, hey, here I am, everybody accept me for my blazing authenticity and I'm bringing my whole self to work. No, it's about, like you said, understanding your own discomfort, doing your own inner work, and then bringing those lessons and those human lessons and wisdom that you've acquired and figuring out how to inject those into the day-to-day decisions in an organization or a corporation. So anyway, I like where you took my train of thought. Thanks for that.
Sure. Well, and I think it's having understanding that everyone else is a complex human with their own things going on inside of them, that, they are not bringing their whole self to work. They might not feel completely comfortable. Everybody has a wildly different experience of life. Even if we think we're all experiencing the same thing, we're not. Even siblings who grow up in exactly the same environment can have completely different views on life. Take strangers, so much of the way we experience life, the way we think the world is, and things that we start to believe are true, right? That's been a big focus for me this year too, belief versus knowing what is actually true. I said something earlier, a lot of things aren't true, but they're still useful and they can be beautiful. But, our perspective colors everything. And that's actually something I learned in art school. Way back when you mentioned I was the museum director, I was the exhibitions director for most of that time. But before that, I had gotten my art degree. And one of the things they teach you is to draw what you see, not what you think you see. And it seems that simple, but just stopping and noodling on that a minute. Like, what does that mean? Like, we think we see things that aren't there. And it's like if you go to draw a portrait, I'm drawing you right now. Like, I'm going to draw an eye shape like this. I'm drawing symbols, basically. Like that, what we think we see. We don't see what's real. And so learning that when I was only 18 years old kind of set me on this path. And not that I had this great realization back there, and it still took me many years, but realizing like, oh, right, we think we see things that aren't there. We see things in symbols. We see things in patterns. We see patterns because our brain is a pattern matching machine, right?
Yeah.
And we see, oh, I know what that is. You only know what that is because it matches some pattern that you've seen before. Somebody else might see a completely different pattern. So when all these thought leaders out there are saying like, oh, this is the way it is, and this is what you have to do, I'm like, sure, that's one way. One way. So I don't know. There's so much possibility out there, which is also why I live in the school of the possible. That's like, there's so much possibility out there. We just don't even know.
Yeah, there is. And yet there are still things that truly matter to us. And so there's a dynamic tension there. And this thing really matters to me, yet I want to be open to the possibilities. So, one of the most powerful things for me about leaving my corporate role was the space that it gave me to kind of decompress and realign with my own core values, not the corporate's core values. So how has this year and your journey changed your sense of purpose, and how it helped you rediscover what really matters to you?
That's a great question. So it's got me thinking a lot more about creativity, which is such a loaded word. People use it to mean a lot of different things. I think that humans are innately creative. We want to create things. We want to create a change in the world. That's how we feel meaningful and purposeful. You have kids, seeing the babies as they're growing up and they want to destroy stuff and hit things and make noises. They want to be like, oh my God, if I do this, it makes a sound. And adults continue to be that way. We want to make an impact on the world, and we want to see the results of our effort. And that's something that I thought quite a bit about when I was in digital marketing. So and as a strategist too, like, what is it that I just made? Like, what is the thing? And a lot of people would talk about artifacts and, oh, well, we made the brief. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't feel meaningful to me. Yeah. But I know we made progress and we have more clarity, and that is the job. Like, that's the thing. But it's still difficult to see. And so there's something about create, and I love to craft. Like I make stuff, I crochet, I embroider, I paint, I bead, I always have something. And a lot of that is because I like it when it's done. I don't always love the journey even, but I like to go like, oh, I made that. I made that thing. It feels good. And knowledge
Okay.
work, we can't always see what it is that we made.
Yeah.
And I think that contributes to burnout too. Also, I believe that humans are supposed to work in cycles and seasons. I
Okay.
mentioned to you before we started recording that I had lived in San Francisco and never really felt very comfortable there. And part of it was the lack of seasons because I had grown up somewhere where there were seasons, and I want to feel the first cool day after summer, and I want to feel that first warm day after winter, and that makes me feel alive. And museum work was so fun for me because it was cyclical. The show, had a cadence, and you were working on several different shows at once, which were in different things, but there's cadence, and then there was the period of rest, and I didn't get that at corporate. Like we had, dot releases and our big annual summit, but it still didn't quite feel like a cadence. That we're just going and the same thing all the time. Actually, listened to your talk with Francois, and he said something that's similar about the mundane career of just like doing the same thing over and over again, and how that doesn't feel good to someone who is really creatively pulled.
Yeah. The way you're
So,
describing it for me sounds like a heartbeat versus just a monotone. And it's like in business, you're chasing growth, right? Year over year growth. And so it's always trying to be on an upward trajectory. And if there are any bumps, it's still on an upward trajectory and everybody's just trying to make this thing upward. Whereas more creativity is like you said, it's like a cycle or a heartbeat, right? And so you get that sense of progress, of evolution, of it being something different, of something changing. Whereas in business, things are changing, but they're always on the same trajectory.
yeah, and I think you just said something really interesting because so much about business is how we measure the time and the periods of time by which we measure things, usually quarterly, yearly, right? Because the line to the stock market and all of that, they want to see up every single quarter. But sometimes if you can be down and then go way up, and creativity, if you're truly being creative, it's something that's brand new that hasn't been done before, you probably have to match up a lot. You have to try things that won't necessarily work. And everybody knows that and says that. Like, yes, failure is not failure. It's learning. But then if you don't hit this number, so you have to have leaders who are willing. And sometimes I can't even say like the leaders aren't willing. Like they're tied into it because of just the way the finances work. Like if their numbers are down, they might lose their job. So I wish that we could measure things over a longer time period. And that's the beauty of being out on your own, is because you can set that. I can be like, you know what? This is a weird year for me. This is a slow year. I haven't made a lot of money, but you can't do that in corporate. You have to answer to a different God.
I think it happens there if you're aware of your own, so you've done your own inner work and you're aware of your own cycle, it can happen, but it's much more difficult. If you get out of college, go to work, you don't have that time to deconstruct everything that you've put together and then find your own rhythm in it. I know when I came out and made the leap over the past 10 years, this has probably been one of the most challenging things for me. Every time I start a project, an entrepreneurial venture or something, my corporate training starts going down the financial models, the business plans, and I start trying to project out into the future. And then at the same time, I've had time to observe my own rhythms and cycles. And I go, well, if I'm going to start a business, it has to look like this, but I look like this. So how do I take this and make them work together? And I'm finding my own answers. And one of them is this community, Corporate-Dropouts, works on a schedule that works with my cycle, which I have a kind of a weekly rhythm where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm kind of building and things are feeling really good. And then by the time I get to Friday night, Saturday, things are going down. And usually Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning, I'm in the fetal position going, what's the point? But I know that's just my own thing. And I know that it used to, when that would happen, it put me down for a couple months. Sometimes I would be in that, what's the point, apathetic situation and going, oh, I'm never going to have a business. It's never going to look like this. What's the point? But now that I know I have this weekly rhythm, it's helped me to get a little bit more consistency on the business side to keep the momentum going and let things kind of unfold how they're going to be. Because I know on Sunday, like by the end of the day, I'm going to start coming out of it. And then Monday hits and I start climbing out of it. And I think finding that rhythm, your own personal rhythm with a business model that works as a solopreneur or a coach or whatever you're doing in business, or if you're going back into corporate, finding a job that works with your own personal rhythm seems to be like a holistic answer, at least for me.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that you can recognize that in yourself. I don't think too many people stop and go like, how is it that I really work? And when do I have my energy? Because you have to plunge yourself into the existing system, especially if the corporation and been around for a long time and has been great practices in procedure.
That's the challenge I have back to somebody that tells me that is that, like you actually have the choice to show up there every day and plug yourself into that system.
Yeah.
And we're not stopping in the morning to go look in the mirror and go, all right, I'm choosing to go to this job today. Am I going to do it in a way that's meaningful for me? Or do I just go and do whatever they tell me? Or I just plug myself in because it's just easier and it's more comfortable that way? I don't know that I ever made that conscious decision when I was going to my job. I just got up, threw my clothes on and went and tried to keep up with what was going on. I think stopping and actually choosing each day to go and do that thing is actually an important reflection. And, taking it back to your health challenge, I didn't have that experience coming out, but I had a mentor show up before I left my job and ask me a really crucial question. If you only have 90 days left to live, what would you be doing with your time? And nothing in my day was in those answers. And I thought, wow, this is really, I'm not making a choice to live the things that are important to me and the things that I value most, which, like 90 days left, I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to go do some things on my bucket list, and none of those things were even on the horizon, and I thought, wow, that's really strange that I've made the choice to do this over here when I value these things over here. And how did that work? You actually had a 90-day experience.
Yeah. Well,
how did that affect you?
The initial diagnosis is the scary part because you don't know really what it is yet, right? I didn't know that I had the easy kind. And that was scary as shit. As you were talking, it made me think of many of the writers, coaches, speakers, gurus, if you will, that I love have all hit rock bottom at some point, right? Drugs and alcohol, familial stuff, like sometimes it takes that to have that awareness moment of like, what am I doing? Like, what do I want? What do I want? Is this the life I want? Is this the life I want for my kids? Right? That's something I think about a lot. Am I being the mom that I want to be for them? Because so much of what I'm doing is shaping who they are going to be when they're adults. And like, I know I can't prevent I'm going to traumatize them in some way, I'm sure. But if I can equip them to be curious, that's the thing I think about a lot. So what do you want? And that, I think I said earlier that I feel like the cancer gave me permission to slow down and think more about like, what do I really want? What do I like? And purpose, I think, is useful, but I'm also trying to go even beyond that. Just be and just exist and just like the life that I'm living is the life I'm supposed to be living because I'm living it and that's what's real. And everything that's happened in the past was supposed to happen. Now, this is one people will like to challenge me on the everything happens for a reason, not necessarily for a reason, but it happened and therefore it is true. So if you go around wishing things were different, the expectations are what cause so much of the pain that we have. Or suffering, I should say, not pain, suffering. We can turn that off. Actually, before I left my corporate job, I started getting into Stoicism. And it was because of the young man who was making it accessible to my generation. I feel like Ryan Holiday, who's written great books, and he's got a great business model. Really, it's just like the ancient wisdom and bring it to the contemporary day. But there's so much of that kind of stuff in there about like we suffer more in our minds than in reality, and expectations are a big, big part of that. In fact, that's something that I talk about in my coaching, which ends up being a little less coaching, a little more advising, but around not setting clear expectations, setting agreements, having agreements with people instead of setting expectations. Nobody wants an expectation held on them unless they have agreed to it. Otherwise, you got to live up to what somebody else wants. And maybe you're like, I don't really want that. It just ends up building resentment. But that's so hard in business, right? Because we have to set expectations of what we need to achieve. You can set goals and then talk about it and figure out what we're going to agree on, what we're capable of doing, right? You can't promise something that you have no control over, but business wants that. People want the certainty.
Yeah, I think the OKR movement, objectives, key responsibilities movement, that Google started was the closest thing I've seen so far to trying to get an agreement between management and staff. But even then, it doesn't always get implemented very well. And then now we're back to KPIs and key performance indicators and things. So, but I really like that reframe of let's not set performance expectations. Let's set performance agreements. Let's get together and talk about what's good for you, what's good for me. Let's make this a win-win.
Yeah, and make it as objective as possible. And this comes from my days as a strategist, right? It's got to be very clear, tangible, concrete. What does success look like? How do we know? How do we know? And now what can we agree to? And maybe sometimes all you can agree is to do your task because you're hoping that your task, your output will lead to the outcome, but you still can't promise the outcome. You can only promise your output. I don't know. It's so complicated though, right? There is no easy answer. And that's also what drove me into this more human stuff is, okay, well, when there is no easy answer and when it depends and it always is on this continuum somewhere, how do we deal with our own discomfort with uncertainty to work together and make progress anyway?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the thing. That's what business is. Get people together, make progress.
Yeah. And if you go out on your own, it doesn't change. Instead of you having a team around you, you have the team of voices that you hear. Now you can hear 8 different voices in your head during the day because it's so quiet. You don't have coworkers shouting at you and you don't have emails coming in. So now you got to figure out how to get those 8 voices together and deal with the uncertainty in front of you and figure out what the agreement is between all those voices that you have, because you've got the cheerleader in you, the inner critic, the imposter, like all those voices, and they all have valid viewpoints, just like your coworkers. So instead of telling one to shut up or ignoring one another, this one or that one, it really is about creating that agreement within ourselves of what our definition of success looks like. And myself, I think where I've gotten to with my voices is, hey, we're going to work every day to just show up. Because dealing with depression and anxiety has taught me, like, the biggest thing I can do is just keep moving forward so that I show up every day. Because if I don't show up, it doesn't even give an opportunity for something to happen. So if I can just get my voices to agree to help me show up, to talk to you, to talk to people in the community, that's a win for me. That's success for me that day. And it's as simple as that. For everybody, it's different. And you really helped me reflect here on my definition of success. So thank you for that.
I hear you on the just showing up part. And I think I mentioned that earlier with the thing in action. That's why I started my Substack and made myself write every single week. And not every single post is great. And that's another thing. People are like, don't send crap out into the world. Hell, I tell myself don't send crap out into the world. But then there's another part of me that's like, yes, and you have to keep doing and learning and growing and staying in action. And this is part of how you do it. And if people don't want to get your emails, they will unsubscribe. It doesn't matter. Just do it. Stay in action. If I truly want to be creative, I'm going to have to try some stuff that doesn't work out all that well. And I have to be okay with that. That's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could go back and tell, the Kate that was riding high, the strategist with red hat, what would you tell her on the day that she got laid off? And what would you tell her now? What advice did you have?
You will be okay. I think I believed that at the time, but again, I didn't know it, right? I could talk much too long about the difference between knowing and belief, but I think now I know I will be okay. Also, it's my own definition of what okay is, because there might be people who would look externally at my situation right now. I don't have a lot of income. I have quite a bit of debt. The medical thing, I have medical debt. I'm very lucky to be privileged and have the ability to have debt to borrow. But I'm okay in that I am at peace. My definition is that, like, I still love myself and trust myself, and whatever happens is supposed to happen. And I will just do the next thing, right? There's this phrase in the English language, what you gonna do? Which is often a throwaway phrase of, like, you can't do anything. Well, what you gonna do? But actually, I think it's brilliant, because it's the only thing you can ask is, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do next? You're upset by the thing. What are you going to do? And doing nothing is the choice and all of that. So I think about that a lot.
I love that. I think if I could go back, I'd probably tell myself to just slow down. Slow your roll. You're going to be okay. Slow down.
Do you have this book?
It's on my list.
I just picked this. Actually,
this is the book I'm reading right now. Can't get it to focus. It's called I Didn't Do the Thing Today.
Love it. It's funny. I was just noticing earlier, I picked up another book, a Jon Kabat-Zinn from like 30 years ago, about where you are. What's it called? Wherever you go, there you are. Kind of about mindfulness and presence. I've got a book called In Praise of Slowness. I've got a book called Letting Go. And I'm like, did I buy all these books because I just need other people to validate that it's okay for me to be in the slow period? Because I get this period. And, like, am I healing still? Probably. Also, maybe this is part of the cycle, right? Things are forming in my brain that I don't know yet, but they'll come out later. Oh, it's a good thing that I had that weird year and a half, you know? Do you know I'm sorry, all of a sudden I'm getting into books. Orbiting the Giant Hairball by Gordon McKenzie.
No.
Maybe from the mid-90s.
Okay.
Brilliant. It's beautiful. It's very small and it's full of his illustrations and drawings too. But he's got a story in there where he imagined the owner of the dairy farm is a businessman and he sees all the cows standing around in the field and is like, why are you not hooked up to the machine making milk? And that is part of the work, is the cows just being cows. And then
Right.
he ties with the creative. Like creative, and actually this was one of the things I wrote about recently on Useful Beautiful, was creatives need room to just fuck around and space and slow down and do things they've never done before and read something that's totally outside the realm of their discipline. And, that's where the printing press came from, is because he went to a winery and saw the wine press, right? Like if you're totally focused on your thing all the time, you're closing all these doors. And the slowness and the willingness to just let things come is so crucial.
Yeah. Well, thank you for validating me as well on that piece of advice I give myself.
Sure.
Any other piece of advice you'd give somebody that's thinking about feeling pulled away from corporate or thinking about making the leap? Anything else you can think of?
I think to stop and reflect on the concept that it's not happening to you, it's happening for you,
Oh, good.
is really powerful. Because if you're in a job that you hate, you can say, all right, this is happening for me. What might I learn from this? What might I take away from this? Does it happen? Like, what's you going to do? What am I going to do? It's happening for me. And, I use that as the kick to actually go into my writing and all of the creativity stuff that I hadn't thought much about in my life at tech. Be like, I missed that. I got to go back to that. Maybe this is what's happening. It's happening for me. And it's invigorating too, to believe that the universe is benevolent.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I can feel that. I can feel that from here across the Zoom wire. I can feel that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story and wisdom with us. How can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work?
I'm on LinkedIn. Kate Thompson Pro is my handle. And then my Substack. So I write Useful Beautiful. I also write this one called Daily Sticky because they write all the
giggle in that one. Yeah.
I don't throw them away, which actually is kind of a fear thing, right? You're like, I have to just knowledge. But I realized I'm like, I should just do one a day. Just post them Daily Sticky. Sometimes they're dumb. Sometimes they're really useful. But yeah,
I really enjoyed Sticky from today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we're going to let our listeners go now, and Kate and I are going to continue the conversation a little bit, but thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you're on this journey or just considering it, remember, you're not alone. There are other people out there just like you. We're here at Corporate-Dropouts, and so are countless others. We're all each forging our own paths in the world. They look very different from each other, but we can walk together with each other on that path. So until next time, keep moving forward. Come join us on our Wednesday water cooler chats at 11 a.m. Eastern. And I'll see you on the next Corporate Dropouts podcast. Thanks again, Kate.